For Ugenya, Honorable David Ochieng.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand here to support the motion, like other members, with the impending amendment by the Honorable Pukose. Madam Speaker, things happen in this country that people take for granted. There's some time back, a president would just appoint a cabinet, his ministers, and no one would question how they are appointed. But Madam Speaker, in the last week, Kenyans were riveted on their TVs to see for themselves who the president had nominated to become a secretary, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to thank the committee. I personally was very glad to watch my colleagues asking these nominees very probing questions, questions that made Kenyans understand and know the kind of persons they were, questions that made Kenyans understand and know whether they were fit for the office, and above all, questions that made Kenyans understand whether the cabinet is going to understand, the cabinet that we're going to have is fit to serve. Madam Speaker, I'm personally very happy with this cabinet for one reason, that in my 2 terms in Parliament, with cabinet secretaries that were not former members of Parliament, Madam Speaker, we served as MPs. If you would go to a ministry, ask a minister for some support on a road or on a water issue, or on a police matter, but the ministers, because they're not being politicians, had no clue, sometimes very dumb, about people even sleeping hungry. I remember at the time I went to a minister to ask for seed for planting, and he asked me, why do you need seed in your constituency? Why can't they buy themselves? Madam Speaker, we've had ministers who don't understand that Kenyans in this country, some of them cannot afford basic items like food, can't afford basic items like shelter, Madam Speaker. But I'm happy because in this cabinet, more than half of them, Madam Speaker, have served with us in this parliament. They have been MPs or senators, Madam Speaker, and they come from constituencies. They have served people through election, Madam Speaker. I'm certain that they will understand the needs and requirements of our people, Madam Speaker. And that's why, for colleagues who've been in this house that we're going to pass today or tomorrow, Madam Speaker, we want to ask them not to forget where they have come from. Because the reason they've been chosen, in my opinion, Madam Speaker, is that they're able to understand the pulse of the nation, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I had a single issue that I wanted to ask my colleague Wendai and Junet. When they were asking the Honorable nominee for trade, I thought I would hear questions about Kikomi in Kisumu. I thought that I would hear questions about the fish industry in Kisumu being revived, Madam Speaker. And I'm hoping that the nominee for blue economy, nominee for fisheries, the Honorable Mvurya, when passed, is going to spend his time in trying to ensure that the fish you produce in the lake, their processing, Madam Speaker, is done at the lakeside so that people from that part of the country get jobs because of the lake, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm hoping that when we pass the nominee for trade and investment, the Honorable Kuria, that we will have our Kikomi being rejuvenated, that we'll have cotton industry in Nyanza being rejuvenated. Madam Speaker, these are the things that I am hoping, and I'm hoping that the nominees are listening, that my friend, the Honorable Kipchumba, will ensure that the road network in this country is distributed, like he said during the vetting process, that they'll be distributed fairly per constituency. And Madam Speaker, this House must hold the nominees to their words. Madam Speaker, the issue of net worth that is being spoken about on the streets there, Madam Speaker, it is for this House to ensure that those who said they are worth 4 billion or 1 billion or 800 million, Madam Speaker, we hold them to their word, that we will, as a parliament, check at what they have at the end of their term, Madam Speaker. That is why they're asking the questions. The questions being asked about it was not about, today or tomorrow. It's about, we'll be checking in the next 3-4 years what these nominees are worth, whether they are doing the jobs for Kenyans or they have gone there to amass for themselves, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as with any system that's presidential, Madam Speaker, it is important to note that before the president nominated these nominees, Madam Speaker, he considered their competences. He considered their abilities. I'm sure that he even had a conversation with them on the dockets they have been placed at. And that's why I have an issue, especially with the rejection of Madam Malonza. Madam Speaker, if you look at, I've read the report, I've read the engagement between the committee and the nominee, Madam Speaker, and there's nowhere, first of all, where the committee puts a marking scheme, that this is what our marking scheme is about the competence of a nominee. Madam Speaker, I've gone through the report, and the report about Malonza is the same as the report about the other nominees, that the nominee answered questions well, the nominee seemed to understand this. I don't find their recommendation, Madam Speaker, speaking to how they engage with the nominee. There's nowhere in that report, Madam Speaker, where the committee says in the report that the nominee could not answer this question or that. There's nowhere where in the report it says that the nominee answered this question wrongly. There's nowhere, Madam Speaker. And so the observation, in my opinion, does not emanate from the report. In fact, I dare say that the recommendation by the nominee on Madam Malonza is basically baying for blood, Madam Speaker. This is not the time for bloodletting. This is not the time. This is not the time to look for blood, Madam Speaker. This is a time to bring together. This is a time to unite. This is a time to ensure that our country moves forward, Madam Speaker, and we cannot move forward, Madam Speaker, if you're going to fight, look for wars where there are no wars, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in this country, I must say this, that in this country, in 2013, our current president and the former president were ICC indictees. They ran. We elected them. Madam Speaker, in this House, we have more than 30 MPs with cases in court. They are members of Parliament. That's the truth, Madam Speaker. And so you cannot tell me that because Mithika Linturi has a case in court or Madam Aisha Juma has a case in court, then that is, Madam Speaker, I also dare say with a heavy heart that one of us has been convicted, but he ran, was elected, Madam Speaker, because the Court of Appeal allowed him, because we have put in the law, Madam Speaker, that you are guilty till you are innocent till proven guilty, Madam Speaker. And even after being proven guilty, Madam Speaker, we have said in the Constitution that you must have exhausted all the avenues for appeal. The Honorable Aisha Jumwa, the Honorable Mithika Linturi have not even been tried by any court of law, Madam Speaker. You cannot verify the veracity of the charges, Madam Speaker, and so you cannot hold them on different levels of integrity, Madam Speaker, like we hold others, Madam Speaker, and so any recommendation based on either guilt or perceived guilt, Madam Speaker, of Madam Aisha Jumwa or Linturi, Mithika Honorable, Madam Speaker, for me are misguided. Madam Speaker, as I end, I want to request this House that in my now 10, 11 years in Parliament, what I've seen distinguish a Cabinet Secretary is how they understand the members' needs, how they understand the country's needs, not what papers they have, Madam Speaker. In the past, if you look at the first cabinet, Madam Speaker, the first cabinet of this country in 1963, Madam Speaker, few of them had degrees. Few of them had even worked anywhere, Madam Speaker, but they did so well. And so it would be remiss for this assembly to keep harping on papers. This has papers, this has no papers, Madam Speaker, without the ability, Madam Speaker. We know that some people have served this country so well because of the passion they had for the job. Madam Speaker, the Honorable Michuki, may the Lord rest his soul in peace, did so well as a minister for transport, and I don't think he learned anything, he was an engineer or anything, but he did so well in that ministry, Madam Speaker, that the whole country was saying, bring him back. And so what we as assembly must do is to ensure that after we pass these nominees, we put them to task. Madam Speaker, I'm so happy that we have a president who is so sober, so ready to work, that these ministers, I'm sure in the next 1 or 2 years, they will be gasping for air. Let's put them to task, let them work for the country, Madam Speaker.